The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a silver cathedral, its walls gleaming under artificial starlight. Commander Kate Morrison stood in the center of the chamber, her military boots clicking against the polished floor as she took her position at the defendant's podium. Around her, representatives from 12 different alien species sat in curved rows that rose toward the ceiling like theater seats. Kate looked up at them with steady eyes. Her face bore the marks of war. A jagged scar ran from her left temple to her jaw. Her right arm was clearly artificial, made of dark metal that caught the light. When she walked, there was a slight limp in her step. But her back was straight, and her chin was high. In the gallery behind her, Admiral Jake Collins sat with his hands folded. He wore the dark blue uniform of the Human Alliance Navy, his chest covered with ribbons and medals. Jake had known Kate for 15 years. He knew what was coming, and he almost felt sorry for the aliens who had demanded this hearing. At the prosecutor's bench, Council Member Veltar rose to his full height. The Zephyrian was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and large black eyes. His voice carried easily through the chamber when he spoke. "Commander Morrison," Veltar said, his words precise and cold, "you stand before this council to answer charges of excessive warfare tactics employed by human forces during the recent conflicts in the Outer Rim territories." Kate said nothing. She simply waited. Veltar held up a data pad that glowed with alien symbols. The Kethva Collective has filed 17 formal complaints about human military conduct. The Nexari Republic has filed 23. The Archon Federation has filed 9. All cite the same concern. Humans fight in ways that violate accepted standards of civilized warfare. Around the chamber, alien heads nodded in agreement. The Archons were crystalline beings that looked like living gemstones. When they moved, their bodies chimed like wind chimes. The Nexari existed as clouds of glowing gas contained in mechanical suits. The Kethva resembled giant insects with mandibles that clicked when they spoke. These species claim, Veltar continued, that humans show a reckless disregard for their own safety that borders on insanity. They say human soldiers continue fighting long after any reasonable being would surrender. They say humans endure wounds that should incapacitate them. They say humans make tactical decisions that no sane military commander would consider. Kate's lips curved upward slightly. It was not quite a smile, but something close to it. Several aliens in the front row shifted uncomfortably. "To prove these charges," Veltar said, "we have called you here to provide a complete medical accounting of the injuries you sustained during the Outer Rim conflicts. Your service record shows you participated in 47 combat operations over a period of 3 years. Our medical experts will examine your wounds to determine whether human fighting methods constitute a threat to galactic stability." Admiral Collins leaned forward in his seat. He remembered the first time he had met Kate, back when she was a lieutenant fresh out of the academy. She had been bright-eyed and eager, with smooth skin and a quick laugh. Now she stood before the most powerful beings in the galaxy, her body rebuilt with metal and synthetic tissue telling a story written in scars. "Commander Morrison," Veltar said, "you will provide a detailed account of each injury you received, explaining the circumstances that led to the wound and the medical treatment required. You will answer all questions truthfully and completely." Kate nodded once. "Understood." "Furthermore," Veltar added, "you will explain why human military doctrine appears to encourage soldiers to sustain injuries that other species would consider fatal or permanently disabling." The chamber fell silent. Even the constant hum of the life support system seemed to fade. Kate stood perfectly still for a long moment, her artificial hand flexing slightly. When she spoke, her voice was clear and steady. "Council Member Veltar," she said, "are you asking for a chronological account of my wounds?" "Yes. From the beginning of your service in the Outer Rim to the present day." Kate's smile grew wider. It was the kind of expression that made hardened soldiers take a step back. Admiral Collins had seen that smile before, usually right before Kate did something that would become legend. "All of them?" Kate asked. "All of them. The major ones and the minor ones. Every injury that required medical attention." Kate looked around the chamber, her gaze moving from one alien face to another. The Archon's crystalline forms dimmed slightly, as if they sensed something approaching. The Nexari's gas clouds swirled faster inside their containment suits. The Kethva's mandibles clicked nervously. "You want to know about the burns and the broken bones," Kate said slowly. "The torn muscles and the damaged organs, the neural damage and the blood loss, the prosthetics and the implants and the synthetic tissue. Yes, you want to know why I kept fighting when any reasonable person would have stopped. That is correct." Kate was quiet for another moment. When she spoke again, her voice carried something that made the aliens lean back in their seats. It was not anger or hatred. It was something far more dangerous. It was certainty. "You want to understand why humans fight the way we do," she said. "Why we take risks that seem insane. Why we endure pain that should break us. Why we keep getting back up when we should stay down." Yes. The Council requires this information to determine appropriate military protocols for future engagements. Kate's smile became something that would haunt alien nightmares for generations to come. It was the smile of someone who had walked through hell and found it wanting. It was the smile of someone who had paid prices that others could not imagine, and considered it a bargain. "In order?" she asked. The question hung in the air like a challenge. Admiral Collins closed his eyes and whispered a prayer for the alien species who thought they were conducting a simple military tribunal. They had no idea they were about to receive an education in human nature that would change the balance of power in the galaxy forever. "Yes," Beltar said, his voice suddenly less certain. "In chronological order." Kate nodded once. "Then let me tell you a story about humans, Council Member Veltar. Let me tell you why we fight." The chamber fell silent, waiting for her to begin. Kate rolled up the sleeve of her uniform, revealing a series of thin white scars that ran in parallel lines along her forearm. The marks were old, faded to silver against her skin. "These were the first," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the silent chamber. "New Haven colony 3 years ago. I was a lieutenant then, fresh out of the academy. I thought I knew what war looked like." She traced one of the scars with her artificial finger. "Lieutenant Ben Carter and I were assigned to guard the mining station on the colony's northern continent. Routine patrol duty. Nothing was supposed to happen." The alien council members leaned forward, listening intently. Veltar held his datapad ready, prepared to record every detail. "The Kethva hit us at dawn," Kate continued. 40 raiders against 2 humans and a mining crew of 30 civilians. Our backup was 6 hours away. The miners had families in the settlement below. Children. Old people. They couldn't run fast enough if the Kethva broke through. She paused, remembering. Ben and I had standard military rifles and about 200 rounds of ammunition between us. The miners had industrial tools. That was it. Council member Thexani, one of the Archons, chimed softly. "Standard military protocol would be to conduct a fighting withdrawal, preserving military assets for future operations." Kate's scarred face turned toward the crystalline being. "Standard military protocol assumes you have somewhere to withdraw to. We didn't. Behind us were 30 people who trusted us to keep them safe." She returned her attention to her arm. "The first day was easy. We had prepared positions and good fields of fire. Ben was an excellent shot. I was better with explosives. We held them off until dark, then used the mines to set traps during the night." The Nexari representative, a swirling cloud of blue gas named Mordeth, spoke through his mechanical translator. "When did you sustain the injuries to your arm?" "Day 3, Kate said. "We were down to 60 rounds of ammunition. Ben had taken shrapnel in his leg. The Kethva had figured out our defensive pattern and were coordinating their attacks better." She held up her arm, showing the scars more clearly. "I used broken glass from the station windows to make improvised weapons. Cut myself pretty badly in the process. But glass was sharp and we needed every advantage we could get." "You armed yourself with broken glass?" Veltar asked, his voice incredulous. "Glass, metal shards, anything with an edge." Ben and I took turns cutting our arms and hands, using our blood to write messages on the station's outer hull. Warning signs for our backup forces, information about Kethva positions and numbers. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers and clicks. The idea of deliberately injuring oneself to create writing material was apparently beyond alien comprehension. Kate waited for the noise to die down. Day 4. We were down to 20 rounds and the HFY had brought up heavy weapons. They started shelling the station. That's when I got these. She turned her head, showing the burn scars that covered the right side of her face. The skin was puckered and discolored, clearly the result of severe burns. The reactor core was taking damage from the shelling. If it went critical, the explosion would kill everyone in the station and send radioactive debris into the settlement below. Someone had to manually override the safety systems and vent the core. The reactor room was filled with superheated plasma. She continued, her voice matter of fact. The environmental suits were destroyed in the first day of fighting. I put on 3 layers of mining gear and walked into a room where the air was hot enough to melt metal. Admiral Collins shifted in his seat. He had read the reports, but hearing Kate tell it in her own words was different. Her voice carried no hint of pride or boasting. She spoke like someone describing a grocery shopping trip. The override controls were 40 meters from the entrance. The plasma vents were running at maximum output, trying to cool the core. I had to walk through streams of liquid fire to reach the control panel. The burn scars on her face seemed to glow under the chamber's lights. My helmet started melting after about 10 minutes. The visor cracked and hot gas started leaking in. I could smell my own hair burning. "Why did you not withdraw and allow the reactor to explode?" asked another Archon. Kate looked at the creature with something approaching pity. "Because 30 people would have died, and because that's not what humans do." She continued her story. I could hear the children crying through the station's hull. The sound carried through the metal. I used that sound to guide me when my helmet completely melted and I couldn't see anymore. I followed the voices of the people I was trying to save. "You navigated by sound alone?" Mordeth asked. "For the last 15 meters, yes." I crawled on my hands and knees, feeling for the control panel. My gloves had melted away. I was touching superheated metal with bare skin. The artificial hand flexed again, and several aliens noticed that the scars extended past her wrist, disappearing under her sleeve. I found the panel and managed to initiate the emergency vent. The core pressure dropped, and the danger passed. Ben pulled me out of the reactor room with a mining cable. I was unconscious for 2 days. "And then you returned to duty?" Veltar asked. Kate nodded. Day 6. Ben's leg was infected and he couldn't walk. The HFY were massing for a final assault. I had severe burns over 30% of my body, but I could still hold a rifle. Her smile returned, that dangerous expression that made the aliens uncomfortable. "That's when we won." "How?" "The backup forces arrived just as the HFY attacked, but they arrived at the wrong landing zone, 3 kilometers south of our position. They needed coordinates and tactical information." Kate touched the scars on her face. "I climbed to the top of the station's communications tower with the only working radio. The tower was taking direct fire from HFY weapons. I stayed up there for 6 hours, calling and targeting coordinates and relaying intelligence. While under fire? The whole time. The HFY knew where I was after the first transmission. They tried everything to bring down that tower. Rockets, energy weapons, even ramming attacks with their aircraft." She was quiet for a moment, remembering. "I got hit by shrapnel 4 times during those 6 hours. Broken ribs, punctured lung, severe blood loss. But I kept transmitting." "Why?" Kate's expression grew serious. "Because our forces needed information to save those 30 people. Because Ben was counting on me. Because that's what humans do when people are depending on us." The chamber was completely silent now. Even the life support system seemed to have stopped humming. The battle ended at sunset on day 6. All 30 civilians were safe. Ben recovered from his injuries. The HFY retreated from the system. Veltar looked down at his datapad, then back at Kate. "And these injuries you described were classified as minor by human medical standards?" Kate's smile widened. "Those were the easy ones, Council member. Would you like to hear about the real wounds?" Kate unbuttoned her uniform jacket and set it aside. Underneath, she wore a simple black shirt that revealed more of the damage. Her left shoulder was clearly artificial, the metal joint visible where it connected to her remaining flesh. Dark lines ran across her chest and back, marking where synthetic tissue had been grafted to replace what was lost. "Firebase Delta," she said, and Admiral Collins felt his stomach tighten. He remembered Delta. He remembered the reports that had come back from that nightmare. "I was a captain by then," Kate continued, her voice still calm and steady. "The Nexari had captured a human research station and were using it as a base to launch psychic attacks against our colonies. They had taken 43 prisoners, including Dr. Lisa Hayes, our chief xenobiologist. The Nexari representative, Mordeth, shifted uncomfortably in his containment suit. His gas cloud swirled faster, betraying his agitation. The station was built into an asteroid, completely sealed and heavily defended. The only way in was through a maintenance tunnel that had been damaged in the initial attack. The tunnel was partially collapsed, filled with debris, and rigged with explosive charges. Kate touched her artificial shoulder. "I volunteered to lead the infiltration team. 12 humans, all volunteers. We knew it was a one-way mission." "Explain," Veltar demanded, his data pad ready. "The tunnel was too narrow for full armor. We had to crawl through on our bellies, single file, for almost 2 kilometers. The Nexari had sensors watching every meter. One wrong move and they would collapse the entire tunnel." She paused, her artificial hand flexing. "We made it halfway before they detected us. They triggered the first set of charges. The tunnel started, coming down around us. The chamber was silent except for the soft clicking of Kethva mandibles. A support beam came down on my left arm, pinning me to the floor. The tunnel was filling with toxic gas from broken atmosphere processors. My squad was trapped behind me, and ahead of us 43 humans were being tortured by Nexari mind probes." Kate's voice remained steady, but something cold crept into her eyes. "I had 2 choices. Wait for rescue that wasn't coming, or get free and continue the mission." "How did you escape?" asked one of the Archons. Kate held up her artificial arm. "I didn't escape. I used my combat knife and a medical bone saw from my emergency kit to amputate my arm at the shoulder." The silence that followed was deafening. Several aliens made sounds of distress. The Kethva clicked rapidly among themselves, and the Archons dimmed to almost nothing. "You performed surgery on yourself?" Veltar's voice was barely a whisper. "Field amputation," Kate corrected. "I stayed conscious the entire time. Had to. Someone needed to guide the others through the tunnel once I cleared the obstruction." She touched the scars on her chest. "I used emergency medical foam to seal the wound and stimulants to stay alert. Then I crawled another kilometer on one arm, clearing mines and traps for my squad, while bleeding from a severed limb. The mission came first. It always comes first." Admiral Collins remembered the footage from Kate's helmet camera. He had watched it once, then ordered it classified at the highest levels. No one should see what Kate had done to herself in that tunnel. "We reached the station 3 hours later," Kate continued. "My squad was intact, but I was in severe shock from blood loss. The entry point was a narrow shaft that led directly into the Nexari command center." She stood up and turned around, showing the extensive scarring across her back. The Nexari had converted their prisoners into living psychic amplifiers. They were using human brains to boost their mind control abilities. The scars on her back formed a complex pattern, like lightning frozen in flesh. Dr. Hayes was connected to the main psychic transmitter. The Nexari were using her to broadcast mental control signals to human colonies across 3 sectors. Thousands of people were being turned into slaves. Kate sat back down, her artificial arm whirring softly as it moved. The only way to disrupt the signal was to overload the transmitter, but someone had to make physical contact with the psychic interface. "What did that involve?" Mordeth asked, though his voice suggested he didn't want to know. "Direct neural connection to an alien mind control device," Kate said simply. "I plugged myself into a machine designed to tear apart human consciousness. The neural damage was visible now, thin lines of scarring that ran along her spine and disappeared under her shirt. The feedback was immediate. The Nexari transmitter started rewriting my memories, changing my thoughts, trying to turn me into one of their slave soldiers. Her voice took on a distant quality. I could feel my mind being taken apart piece by piece. They were erasing everything that made me human. My name, my memories, my loyalty to the human alliance. It felt like drowning in ice water. How long were you connected? Veltar asked. 27 minutes. The alien stared at her in shock. 27 minutes of having alien thoughts forced into my brain. 27 minutes of watching my memories being deleted. 27 minutes of fighting to remember who I was and why I was there. Kate's smile returned, but now it looked like a predator baring its teeth. But I held on. Do you want to know how? No one answered, but she continued anyway. I held on because I could hear Dr. Hayes screaming. I could hear the other prisoners begging for help. I could hear human children on distant colonies crying out as their parents turned into mind-controlled slaves. The scars on her back seemed to pulse with remembered pain. Every time the Nexari tried to erase my identity, I focused on those voices. Every time they tried to make me forget my mission, I remembered the people who were counting on me. And you succeeded in overloading the transmitter? Asked an Archon. I did more than that, Kate said. I reversed the signal. Instead of broadcasting mind control to human colonies, I turned the transmitter into a weapon that attacked every Nexari within 100 light years. Mordeth's gas cloud turned a darker shade of blue. That is impossible. Human minds are not compatible with Nexari psychic technology. Kate's artificial hand pointed at her scarred back. This says otherwise. The neural feedback burned out most of my spinal cord. I was paralyzed from the neck down for 6 months, while military doctors rebuilt my nervous system with synthetic components. She turned back to face the council. But the mission was successful. All 43 prisoners were rescued. The mind control network was destroyed, and the Nexari learned that humans don't break as easily as they thought. What was your medical classification after this mission? Veltar asked. Moderate injuries with full recovery expected, Kate replied. I was back on active duty 8 months later. The council chamber buzzed with alien conversation. The idea that someone could endure neural destruction and consider it a moderate injury was clearly beyond their comprehension. Kate waited for them to quiet down, then smiled that dangerous smile again. Would you like to hear about the time I lost my legs? Kate stood and walked to the center of the chamber, her slight limp more pronounced now. She moved with careful precision, each step deliberate and controlled. When she reached the middle of the floor, she stopped and looked up at the assembled aliens. Kepler Station, she said, and the name hung in the air like a death sentence. The final battle of the Outer Rim War. Admiral Collins closed his eyes. He had been there. He had given the orders that sent Kate on her last mission, the orders that had ended the war and nearly destroyed the best soldier he had ever known. Yandik, Kethva, Nexari, and Archon forces had formed an alliance. Kate continued. 3 fleets, over 200 ships moving to attack Earth itself. Kepler Station was the only thing standing between them and humanity's homeworld. She walked slowly. As she spoke, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. The station was a research facility, not a military base. It had minimal weapons and no shields, but it was positioned at the only jump point that could reach Earth in less than 6 months. The alien representatives watched her pace, hypnotized by the rhythm of her movement. My orders were simple, Kate said. Buy time for Earth's defenses to mobilize, hold Kepler Station as long as possible, delay the enemy fleet by any means necessary. She stopped walking and faced the council. I had 1 ship, the UAS Phoenix, a heavy cruiser with a crew of 318. We were outnumbered, 600 to 1. Those odds are mathematically impossible to overcome, stated Council Member Zrixtal, a Kethva warrior whose mandibles clicked with certainty. Kate's smile was sharp as a blade. You're thinking like an alien, Council Member. Humans don't calculate odds when people are depending on us. We calculate what needs to be done. She began walking again, her artificial components whirring softly with each step. The enemy fleet arrived at Kepler Station exactly on schedule. 3 massive dreadnoughts leading a formation that stretched across half the system. They expected to find an empty research station. Instead, they found the Phoenix, sitting directly between them and the jump point to Earth. Kate stopped and turned to face Veltar. The HFY commander sent a surrender demand. He offered to spare my crew if I abandoned the station immediately. "What was your response?" Veltar asked. I told him that humans don't abandon their posts. Then I opened fire. The chamber erupted in shocked clicks and chimes. The idea of a single ship attacking a fleet was apparently as alien as Kate's previous stories. The Phoenix lasted exactly 47 minutes in direct combat, Kate continued. We destroyed 6 enemy ships and damaged 12 others before our weapons were gone, and our engines were failing. She touched her chest where more scars were visible through her shirt. That's when I gave the order to ram the lead dreadnought. You ordered a collision course? Mordeth asked, his gas cloud swirling frantically. I took the helm personally, Kate corrected. My crew had done enough. They had families, lives to return to. The final approach was my responsibility. She walked back to the center of the chamber, her movements slower now, as if the memory was weighing her down. I locked the crew in the escape pods and launched them toward Kepler Station. Then I pointed the Phoenix directly at the HFY flagship and pushed the engines to maximum burn. Kate's artificial hand touched the metal components visible at her collar. The collision was spectacular. The Phoenix punched straight through the dreadnought's hull and detonated our remaining missiles inside their reactor core. Both ships were destroyed instantly. "How did you survive?" asked an Archon. "I didn't," Kate said simply. "Not really. When the ships collided, the Phoenix's bridge was crushed like an egg. Every bone in my legs was pulverized. My spine was severed, in 3 places. My rib cage collapsed and punctured both lungs." She gestured to her body with her artificial hand. 60% of my skeleton was replaced with metal implants. Both legs are completely synthetic from the hip down. My lungs are artificial. My heart has mechanical assistance. Most of my blood is synthetic. The aliens stared at her in horror, finally beginning to understand what they were looking at. But the collision wasn't the end of the mission, Kate continued. The enemy fleet was damaged, but not destroyed. They could still reach Earth if they bypassed Kepler Station. She began walking again, and now the aliens could hear the mechanical whir of artificial joints with each step. The station's communication array was the only way to coordinate Earth's defenses. Someone needed to reach it and broadcast tactical information about the enemy fleet's condition and numbers. "In your condition, that should have been impossible," Veltar stated. Kate's smile returned. "Should have been, yes, but impossible, and humans don't get along very well." She stopped walking and faced the council directly. "I crawled through the wreckage of the Phoenix for 6 hours. Both legs were useless, most of my ribs were broken, and I was bleeding internally. But the communication array was only 2 kilometers away." 2 kilometers, she repeated. Across twisted metal and radioactive debris, through sections of the ship that were open to space. I had to seal my suit with emergency patches and breathe recycled air that was more smoke than oxygen. Kate's voice took on that distant quality again, as if she was seeing the memory play out before her eyes. The worst part wasn't the pain, it was the silence. My crew was unconscious in their escape pods. The enemy fleet had stopped shooting, thinking everyone was dead. For 6 hours, the only sound was my breathing and the creak of metal settling around me. She touched her throat where more scars were visible. The smoke from burning circuits damaged my vocal cords. By the time I reached the communication array, I could barely whisper, but I managed to broadcast the enemy fleet positions to Earth Command. "And that information was sufficient to coordinate Earth's defense?" asked Mordeth. Kate nodded. "Earth's fleet used my tactical data to position themselves perfectly. When the enemy fleet reached Earth, they found a trap waiting for them. The war ended 6 hours later with complete enemy surrender. The chamber was completely silent. Even the life support systems seemed to have stopped." "How were you recovered?" Veltar asked quietly. "Admiral Collins led the rescue mission personally," Kate said, glancing back at her commanding officer. "They found me, still broadcasting coordinates. Even though the battle was over, I had been at the communication station for 12 hours, most of it unconscious but still transmitting. She walked back to her position at the defendant's podium. The medical team said I was technically dead when they found me. No pulse, no brain activity, core temperature below survival levels. But humans are stubborn about things like death. Kate stood at attention, her artificial components gleaming under the chamber's lights. I spent 18 months in military hospitals while they rebuilt me piece by piece. When I was finally cleared for duty, my combat effectiveness rating was actually higher than before the mission. Higher? Zrixtal clicked in confusion. Artificial components don't get tired, Kate explained. They don't feel pain or fear. They don't hesitate when a mission requires sacrifice. The military considers my injuries to be improvements. She looked around the chamber, meeting each alien's gaze in turn. That's what you don't understand about humans. We don't see wounds as weaknesses. We see them as proof that we've paid the price to protect what matters to us. Admiral Collins watched as the realization dawned on the alien faces. They were beginning to understand that Kate wasn't a victim of war. She was the result of war. She was what humans became when they were pushed to their limits and refused to break. Are there more injuries to report? Veltar asked, his voice barely audible. Kate's smile was brighter than starlight and twice as dangerous. Council member, she said. That was just the warm-up. The great chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Kate Morrison stood at the defendant's podium, her scarred face calm and patient, while 12 different alien species tried to process what they had just heard. The silence stretched, on for minutes, broken only by the nervous clicking of Kethva mandibles and the soft chiming of Arkan crystal bodies. Finally, Council member Veltar found his voice. Commander Morrison, he said, his words careful and precise. You have described injuries that should have resulted in death multiple times over. Kate nodded. Yes. You have described scenarios where any rational being would have surrendered or withdrawn. Yes. You have described medical treatments that essentially rebuilt you as a synthetic being. Kate's artificial hand flexed. Partially synthetic. My brain is still original equipment. Veltar looked down at his datapad, then back at Kate. According to our medical experts, the cumulative trauma you have described would render any known species completely incapacitated, yet you continue to serve in active military duty. I do. How is this possible? Kate's smile returned, that expression that had become legend across 3 star systems. Because I'm human, Council Member Veltar, and humans don't break the way. You think we should? Council Member Thexani, one of the Archons, chimed softly. Commander Morrison, our psychological evaluation protocols require us to assess the mental stability of beings who have endured such trauma. Have you undergone psychiatric evaluation? Multiple times. And the results? Kate's expression grew thoughtful. The first psychiatrist recommended immediate medical discharge. She said no one could function normally after experiencing what I'd been through. What changed her assessment? I asked her to define normal, Kate said. She couldn't give me an answer that made sense. Normal for who? Normal under what circumstances? Normal when compared to what baseline? She walked a few steps to the left, her artificial legs moving with mechanical precision. The second psychiatrist tried a different approach. He wanted to know about trauma responses, stress reactions, survival mechanisms, standard psychological evaluation protocols, and I told him the same stories I've told you today. He asked me how I felt about my experiences. The chamber waited for her answer. I told him I felt proud, Kate said simply. Proud that I had done my job. Proud that I had saved people who were counting on me. Proud that I had proven humans don't quit when things get difficult. Veltar leaned forward. You feel no regret? No psychological distress from your injuries? Kate stopped walking and faced the council directly. Council member, you're asking the wrong question. You want to know if I'm damaged by my experiences. But the real question is whether my experiences have made me more effective at protecting humans. And have they? My current combat effectiveness rating is 237% above baseline human standards, Kate said matter-of-factly. I can operate in environments that would kill unmodified humans. I can endure physical trauma that would incapacitate organic beings. I can function without sleep, food, or breathable atmosphere for extended periods. She gestured to her artificial components. Every injury I've described has made me more capable of doing my job, more capable of protecting human lives. From a military perspective, I'm not a victim of war. I'm a success story. The Nexari representative, Mordeth, spoke through his mechanical translator. Commander Morrison, what you describe sounds like a conversion from organic being to military weapon. Kate's smile widened. Now you're beginning to understand. Understand what? What humans become when we're pushed to our limits. What we turn into when people are depending on us. What we're willing to sacrifice to protect what we love. She walked back to the center of the chamber, her movements confident and controlled. You called this hearing to determine whether human military tactics pose a threat to galactic stability. You wanted to understand why humans fight the way we do. Kate spread her arms wide, displaying her scarred and rebuilt body for all to see. This is your answer. This is what humans look like after we've paid the price to keep our people safe. This is what we become when surrender isn't an option. Admiral Collins watched from the gallery as the alien representatives began to truly comprehend what they were facing. Kate wasn't just a soldier who had been injured in combat. She was proof of concept for an entirely different approach to warfare. You see these scars and think they represent weakness, Kate continued. You see my artificial components and think they represent damage. But you're wrong. Her voice grew stronger, carrying an authority that made even the HFY warriors lean back in their seats. These scars represent choices. Choices to put other lives before my own. Choices to endure pain rather than abandon my post. Choices to pay whatever price was necessary to complete my mission. She touched the burn scars on her face. Every mark on my body is evidence that humans don't calculate acceptable losses. We calculate acceptable risk to ourselves while trying to achieve zero losses among those we protect. Councilmember Zrixtal, the HFY warrior, clicked his mandibles nervously. Commander Morrison, are you typical of human military personnel? Kate's laugh was like broken glass. Council member, I'm not even in the top 10% for injury severity in my unit. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers and alien exclamations. The idea that Kate represented an average level of human military dedication was apparently beyond their ability to process. The human soldiers you've been fighting, Kate said, her voice cutting through the noise, have all made the same choice I made. We've all decided that our lives matter less than the lives of the people we protect. She walked closer to the council bench, close enough that they could see the determination in her eyes. You want to know if human military tactics pose a threat to galactic stability? Yes, they do. Because we don't fight wars the way you do. We don't calculate odds or negotiate acceptable losses. We fight until we win, or until there's nothing left of us to fight with. Veltar's voice was barely a whisper. What are you saying? Kate's smile became something that would haunt alien nightmares for generations. I'm saying you can't defeat an enemy that refuses to be defeated. You can't break people who rebuild themselves stronger every time you hurt them. You can't win a war against beings who would rather die than let you harm their families. She turned to address the entire council. You brought me here to explain my wounds. You wanted to understand why humans fight the way we do. Now you know. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was a different kind of silence. It was the silence of predators realizing they had cornered something far more dangerous than themselves. The council will recess to consider your testimony, Veltar said finally. Kate nodded and walked back to her position. Take all the time you need, council member. I'll be here when you're ready. As the alien representatives filed out of the chamber, Admiral Collins approached Kate. How much of that was the truth? He asked quietly. Kate's smile softened, becoming almost human again. All of it, Admiral, every word. And how much did you leave out? Her smile grew sharp again. About 70%. They weren't ready for the full story. Collins shook his head. Kate, you terrified them. Good, she said. Terrified enemies make fewer mistakes. and maybe now they'll think twice before threatening human colonies. 3 hours later, the council reconvened. Veltar stood at the prosecutor's bench, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly. The Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision, he announced. All charges against human military forces are hereby dismissed. Furthermore, the Council formally recognizes human territorial sovereignty and agrees to a mutual non-aggression pact. Kate nodded politely. Thank you, Council member. The Council also wishes to extend an offer of alliance to the Human Republic, should you ever require assistance against external threats. I'll pass that along to my superiors. As the hearing concluded and the aliens filed out, Veltar approached Kate one final time. Commander Morrison, he said quietly, may I ask you one final question? Of course. If this hearing had gone differently, if the Council had ruled against humanity, what would you have done? Kate's smile returned, bright and terrible and full of promise. Council member Veltar, she said, I would have given you the full account. And in that moment, the Zephyrian understood that the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity had announced itself not as another species seeking membership in the galactic community, but as something entirely new. Something that wouldn't be defeated, wouldn't be broken, and wouldn't be stopped. As Kate Morrison walked out of the chamber, her artificial legs carrying her with mechanical precision, every alien in the galaxy knew one thing for certain. They never wanted to be on the wrong side of a human war ever again.